I think solidity she's brought to his son's life. He thinks she's a brilliant mother and is bringing up his grandchildren fantastically. So he's already got a lot of admiration for her, but I know he's also had a lot of admiration for the way she's conducted herself throughout this, you know, admittedly with a lot of people poking her with a stick. And also equally, I think she, from what I hear, was quite inspired by his openness about his own diagnosis and the treatment that he was going through.
Are you serious?
As well.
Well, some people, Richard, have said that actually that has helped pave the way for Catherine and to give her the confidence to go public.
Yes, I think from all we hear, King Charles was interested and perhaps a bit worried about the reaction to his talking about cancer. We've discussed in the past how monarchs would never want to indicate that, you know, they've had cancer. It is a first. And he was very heartened by the reaction, that it was sympathetic and positive. It encouraged talk among people and people willing to discuss cancer. And so that's encouraged Catherine to do the same. So it's definitely a positive thing.
Speaking of Catherine, here are some of our favourite pictures of the now Princess of Wales. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Harry appeared to have finally made the move permanent to America after 4 years. The news came as we heard updates on the couple's Netflix projects and Meghan Markle revealed her new jam. We'll have Rebecca's reaction to that, and Charlotte Griffiths tells us the moment she believes that Meghan's mask slipped.
It relates to the company we were talking about a moment ago, Travelist. And Prince Harry has updated his details with Companies House in Britain, because you have to give your home, your place of residence. And he has finally said that he is now resident in the USA. It's taken him 4 years since they quit Britain. He always said, you know, Britain will always be my home, and it's clearly not now. And, you know, there are all sorts of implications from this. Remember, we've got that case that we've discussed on this programme quite a lot about Harry's immigration status, what he wrote on his forms. It's the subject of a case at the moment with the Heritage Foundation, a think tank that wants to know what did he write. They want to be able to show, you know, what did he say about that past drug use. And then there's other questions about his future roles as well.
Is it, residency doesn't really have any bearing on citizenship, right?
No.
Very good question.
No, so, yeah.
But I think what's really interesting is that date he gave was backdated to the day that King Charles threw him out of Frogmore.
This is really pointed. So when he actually said about since when have you been resident in the USA, he made the point that it was that day that my father evicted me from my lovely home in Windsor.
Oh, not that he's keeping score at all.
No.
At all. Now, Rebecca, we also have an update, don't we, about the Netflix projects of the Sussexes. What can you tell us?
Yeah, this made me smile. So it suddenly found itself in the way to some very sympathetic publications that Harry and Meghan were working on 2 big new projects for Netflix. One was a project being curated by Meghan.
Are you serious?
Which I think is quite an interesting choice of words. Doesn't suggest she features in it or, you know, hosts it, but that's about lifestyle, cooking, friendship, all that sort of thing. And the other is a programme about polo and the kind of fast-paced polo world behind the scenes. Then miraculously, a couple of days later, we first of all, I'm sure we'll get on to discuss this, pots of jam associated with Meghan's new business venture start popping up on social media after she sent them to friends and influencers, and they turn up at the Centre Barley fundraising polo match in Florida with a Netflix crew in.
What is he doing?
In tow. It's almost as if it was planned.
No.
Strategy comms.
Yeah, amazing. Now, Richard, what do you think about these Netflix shows? Will they be setting the world on fire, the box office alight?
I think it's fascinating. I mean, remember, there's been rumours for ages that Prince Harry's next project for Netflix would be about Africa. You know, he loves Africa. It's been central to his life. And the idea that's been mooted was for him to return there and make a documentary.
Why is that?
God, just the mention of that man's name annoys me. I mean, my goodness.
Sorry, it's here on the cards. I have
Yeah, he's been engaging with me on social media as well.
Really?
And this is, he is actually, in terms of the lives of Harry and Meghan, he is actually quite an important figure.
Okay.
And I say that because you might remember their 3-part dire Netflix series that we all had to watch.
I do remember it.
He featured heavily. He's a tech boss, American tech boss. I think he became involved with Harry and Meghan.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Because he was interested, I think he'd made some positive comment about them and then was really interested in the sort of negative response he received. And he started to analyse the response, and he was
Stop it.
convinced that there was a lot of sort of organised trolling of them. And as a result, he's become quite involved with Harry and Meghan, certainly a big supporter. But anyway, over recent weeks, he's been one of the most prominent proponents of conspiracy theories. You know, and even after Catherine's video, I mean, there she was, you know, filmed in the garden, it's filmed by this BBC crew, you know, and then he's still questioning everything and then talking about how...
Wait for it.
The images we'd seen of them visiting a farm shop couldn't have been correct because she looked much healthier in this video, and all
My
this
question
sort of
is,
stuff.
who's got time to spend analysing that kind of stuff?
Well, in a way, it's sort of his job because he's this tech boss. He's got this firm that kind of analyses all this stuff, but he's been really pushing it, and lots of the stuff he's said and in the past is unpleasant. You know, it's personal.
Stop it.
And then I think often he claims racism because he's black, and he's often says, "Oh, you're out to get me because I'm black," or whatever. You just think, shut up, you're just a very annoying man.
I think he revels slightly in the notoriety as a lot of the people have around this. But I think what was amazing is about Catherine's video message was how dignified and how classy it was. And I think that they don't really need to say anything because it's such a direct
That doesn't make sense.
counterbalance to the kind of rabid musings on social media of these kind of conspiracy, spreaders. So I think actually they've come up with the most dignified and appropriate response they could.
It just feels like
Stop it.
there's no response that would be satisfactory.
I think you've hit the nail on the head,
Yeah.
Joe,
Well,
absolutely.
I think Harry and Meghan's sort of loathing of mainstream media as such has led them, into bed with figures like Boozy, and
Wait for it.
that's worrying. To have someone like him featured so heavily in your own series, I think is disturbing.
Crackers. Now, in your newsletter this week, you say that this could be a time for a reset in relations, but from
Okay, I'm listening. You have my attention.
everything you two have just said, I'm not feeling optimistic.
Well, since Catherine's video was broadcast almost a week ago, there have been lots of suggestions that William, with his wife being treated for cancer, should mend fences with his
Here it comes.
brother, that it's a great time for them to, come back together and this sort of thing. But what I've said in my newsletter is that it's up to Harry and Meghan to seek forgiveness. We're in this season of Lent, and they should be the ones
Wait for it.
who apologise for all the hurt they've caused. And I know our lawyers and people wouldn't want me to suggest that they've contributed to the King's or Catherine's illnesses, but certainly what they have contributed to
Hey, y'all, come look at this.
is a terrible state of mental health. That, what has Catherine been having to put up with in silence over the past few years, with just this constant barrage of attacks? Any of us would find that gruelling and hard to take.
Fact.
So they should apologise publicly, privately, and then maybe things can start to heal.
We'll see. Well, if there can be some positive news out of a story like Catherine's diagnosis,
Okay.
we're here to hear about it. And now some news outlets, Richard, are talking about the quote-unquote the Kate effect. What is that?
Well, just all the talk of cancer and has sort of led people to question things themselves. One of the leading cancer charities, Macmillan, saw a big rise, I think it was about 10%, in people searching for information about different types of cancer, this sort of thing. So I think, again, Catherine has helped
Okay, I'm listening. You have my attention.
Normalise it, just like they've done with mental health. They've seen that, you know, it's not that scary word, you know, that big C that no one can mention. And if she's helped to sort of normalise that a bit and make
What is he doing?
people more willing, particularly us men perhaps, to discuss these things, then she's done a good turn.
Indeed. Now, Rebecca, the other thing that this sad news has shown us is that the bond between the King and the Princess of Wales is closer than ever.
Stop it.
It is. I mean, they've always had a very good relationship because they've bonded over kind of art and the music. And I think I've written about in the past how they would often go for secret trips together to the Royal Opera House that no one ever knew about. But obviously now they have, I mean...
Wait for it.
It's sad because obviously no one wants to share a bond like cancer, but they do. And we've had reports which have been confirmed is that the day after she filmed her video message, the King invited her for lunch with him at Windsor Castle. So they've got something to talk about. And I know he really admires her for the... I think solidity she's brought to his sons, peers and MPs, but the place was so big, they were like kind of specks in the distance. You could barely see them.
Wow.
So it effectively was just you and a few ceremonial staff and members of the royal family with Her Majesty the Queen's coffin. And I have to say, a lot of what we saw was actually off camera.
What?
Because people weren't actually allowed to pick up their cameras and photograph until they saw the coffin. But we've probably had about 5 or 10 minutes of waiting and watching. And I mean, the body language was fascinating.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I mean, Camilla, she's been very emotional throughout this whole thing, and she was, you know, straight ahead, looking ahead of her, really trying to control herself.
Okay.
You know, likewise with Kate. I mean, Sophie Wessex, my heart went out to her. She looked
like she was in
bereft.
bits, didn't she? She really looked shattered.
Really upset, doesn't she?
Yeah. And as I wrote in the paper today, you know, as that noise that Kate described got closer, you kind of saw her peer through the entrance as if she really didn't want to believe that this was happening. You know, it was like, oh God, is this the beginning of the end? It's the moment we really have to say goodbye to her.
It's the dreadful thing about funerals, isn't it? Fact. It's that manifestation of, you know, you have to accept that it's happening.
And this is a point at which they kind of handed over from that private night that they'd had at Buckingham Palace, away from the cameras.
Oh my.
The night before, just as a family with the coffin, and basically handing the Queen back to the people.
Yeah.
And it just felt, yeah, it was incredibly emotional. And then, you know, Lady Louise, bless her, she's only young, was in tears. And
yeah, Beatrice usually dabbing their noses. And also one of the things that really moved me were the ladies in waiting, and I've done a piece about them in the paper today. Inspired, kind of weirdly, I found a letter I wrote to the Queen.
I did see your tweet, yeah.
When I was 9, saying I had a school project for our school centenary and had to go around and look at an interesting building, and I just wrote to the Queen saying, like any 9-year-old do, can I come and look around your house, please? Obviously not knowing that later, many years later, I would look around it quite a lot. And I got this amazing letter back, which I say I've still got with the envelope, from the lady in waiting, Mary Morrison, saying, thank you very much for your kind letter, because they respond to every letter personally.
Are you sure about that?
You know, the Queen commands me that, you know, you can't come and look at her house, unfortunately, but we'll suggest the places you can.
Okay.
And Mary Morrison was there yesterday. You know, you can put the maths together and work out how old I am from that, but it was well over 40 years ago.
How old she is.
Did you get a chance to speak to her later?
No, I mean, I would have liked her to tell you, look, I've still got it.
We do not care.
They were standing for a long time, because the whole thing was standing, wasn't it? And you have these 7 ladies in waiting, some of whom are of a great age, actually, themselves.
Yeah, well into their 80s.
Yeah.
And she and people like Lady Susan Hussey have been with the Queen for 60 years.
Isn't it amazing?
I mean, the ladies in waiting fascinate me. They're known as the head girls, and there is nothing that they don't know.
Are you sure about that?
It goes on at that palace. You know, they are the Queen's eyes and ears.
And what's their
everything.
reputation? Are people frightened of them?
Well, if someone said to me, like, when I said to them about the ladies in waiting, they went, "Oh, I love the ladies in waiting. Like, they fascinate and they terrify me in equal measure, you know."
What do you mean by that?
Will the king have men in waiting?
No, but Camilla will probably at some
Yeah.
point have to have a lady in waiting because they just practically need it, you know, for correspondence and picking up flowers. Fact. But I was really moved by seeing them there, these kind of ladies. And they, at one point, one of them needed a seat, but they stood there on their walking sticks. One of them was leaning on their umbrella, and they were just determined to stand there proud by the Queen that they served in life, as they're now going to do in death. And it was things like that were just, I think, incredibly, incredibly moving.
It is amazing. Now, through all of this, Meghan has kept a low profile. How did you think she fit into the proceedings yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, look, the body language was very interesting.
Wow.
I mean, you know, I didn't want to focus the piece I'd written on her today because I think there's just so much more to what we're seeing. But you couldn't help but notice it, especially from where Kate and I were. We were so close to them, you know, right above them. It was a very good vantage point for a journalistic point of view.
Okay.
And you could see Camilla, Kate and Sophie were kind of together, and the body language was very comfortable between them. But then there was Meghan, and you know, you could have almost fitted somebody else in that space. It spoke volumes. You know, even if you didn't know what we all know that's happened over the last few years, you would have turned up and thought, that looks a bit odd, there's something slightly wrong here. But
Come on now, dawg.
But then, to be fair, Sophie, who is known as quite a peacemaker in the family, turned and talked to her, and it kind of brought Meghan into the fold. And you know, she carried herself out with enormous dignity. But you know, someone whispered to me while I was there, "God, that body language speaks volumes," and it did, I have to say.
Really?